So in this week's video, I'm sharing the benefits of making an amends versus a living amends in 12-step recovery. But if you're new, my name's Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist and I love helping people create relationships that work. And in this video, I'm going to show you when you should make a direct amends and when it's best to make what's called a living amends. And I'm going to go through definitions of both. So making amends is a vital part of step 9 in 12-step recovery. It's really about acknowledging the hurt that we've caused other people. But there are going to be certain instances where you should not be making amends directly. And that's why I'm going to share how to make a living amends, because that is just as valuable. So making amends is not simply saying I'm sorry. That's an apology. Making an amends is a real commitment and effort to acknowledge the hurt we've caused someone else. And typically that means we're naming the behavior exactly, and we're really acknowledging sincerely our regrets to that other person without making excuses or rationalizing our behavior. And that's why not everybody does this. Now, this is usually done in person. There are times when you can do it by phone, but I don't recommend doing it by text or by email, because often people will say things in an email or a text that they would never say in person. And that is going to really thwart the amends that you're making, and I don't want that for you. If you've ever tried making an amends, say me too in the comments. That's a great step in your recovery. You might choose to send a letter to someone who's deceased or someone that you absolutely can't find anymore because it's been many years. So that letter is really for you to move on and forgive yourself, even though the other person isn't necessarily going to get that amends directly. So let's talk about when making an amends directly is not a good idea. The first instance is when someone has been physically abusive to you. That's absolutely number one. Number two is you don't feel safe contacting them. Your gut is turning and you feel sick. If you don't feel safe contacting that other person, for whatever reason, I would absolutely trust that. Another instance where I would not want you to make direct amends is when the other person has explicitly said they don't want any contact with you, because you want to respect their wishes and not override them, because that will make the amends much less effective, and in some cases harm them all over again. So let's now talk about the benefits of making a direct amends. This shows tremendous courage, which often is going to bode well for you in that relationship, because the other person may realize and really respect the courage it took for you to seek them out and to make amends directly. Also, when it's done sincerely and with compassion, it can often repair the damage and reignite the relationship. Another important benefit when making amends directly is seeing the reaction that they're having to your amends. This is huge, because if we do it in a letter or a text or leaving them a message, we don't know their response. And the problem is that that doesn't help create closure for you or for them. Versus if you are willing to do it in person or at least by phone, you're going to see and be able to gauge their reaction. And you're going to know by the end of that phone call or the end of that visit whether or not the relationship is repairable, instead of waiting and hoping and being afraid to run into them later, because I don't want that for you. So doing amends directly can greatly decrease your anxiety, because you've handled it in the moment, you know where the relationship stands, and you'll be able to move on from there. The next benefit is that it's going to help you clear up any misunderstandings, because when you're making your amends, they may say something that needs clarification, or they might ask you a question, because if you can do this in a kind way, it's going to help increase your self-esteem, and it's going to bode better for the other person, even if the relationship isn't repairable, because at least both of you can move on. So what if you're really scared to make the amends? That's not enough of a reason not to do it, especially over the phone. If you really can't do it in person because you're just too anxious, at least do a phone call. Because let's face it, making amends means putting on our big girl or our big boy pants and taking responsibility for what we've done. And believe me, every time I do this, I feel like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders, because I feel better about myself. Making amends is not glossing over what happened, hoping the other person's going to reunite with you simply by saying I'm sorry. Because depending on the offense, For instance, if you disrespected them, if you violated their boundaries, if you really hurt them, you're going to really want to go into more acknowledgement and more detail around your own behavior. You're not going to want to simply say, "I'm sorry that I yelled at you," if you repeatedly yelled at them for years. That's a different kind of amends, and that's where being sincere is going to really help your message come across and possibly repair the relationship. Now, I know in 12-step recovery, some people have told me, well, the amends is for you, not for them. Well, I think that's partially true, but not entirely. I do believe that we make amends for that other person too, to clean up the wreckage of our past and to give them some peace that we know what we did and we're sorry. That can go a long way for them to have peace of mind as well as yourself. So when making an amends directly isn't appropriate, you can make what's called a living amends. And this is also from 12-step programs. I love this concept because it's not about directly seeking that person out and saying I'm sorry and acknowledging everything you've done. This is about changing the hurtful behavior from here on out. So for instance, you're not necessarily going to have a specific conversation with that person, but instead, the next time you see them, you're going to act differently. You're going to be kind. You're going to be respectful. You're not going to do the behavior that caused the harm in the first place. So some common examples here might be, maybe you gossiped about them and it was really hurtful. So moving forward, you're committed to not gossiping anymore. Or maybe you have screamed or yelled or raged at someone repeatedly and you feel really bad about it. So in recovery, that means working on your anger management because that's a way to make living amends. You're going to change that behavior so you're no longer abusive or you're no longer yelling at that other person and causing them to be afraid of you. If, for instance, you didn't treat somebody well, then the living amends means treating them with respect from here on out. So you're basically looking at the behavior you did and committing to changing that behavior without necessarily ever mentioning it to that person. So let's talk about the benefits of living amends. The first one is your self-esteem increases because you now feel good about your own behavior. Another benefit is that your relationships are going to improve because as you change your behavior for the better, people are going to notice and you're going to start to attract healthier people as a result. It also rebuilds trust for those people that you've hurt, and that can go a long way, especially if you're in a committed relationship or this is with a family member. But by doing a living amends, they're going to eventually catch on that you're different. And you're committed to making that relationship work by changing that behavior. So what if you're struggling with your own resentments and that's making it difficult for you to make amends? That is a separate issue. So I want you to go watch my video on how to heal your own resentments because I want you to do that work first before you decide to make amends. Thanks so much.